Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Back for another day in the life of Gregory D. Brown video. It's been a while since I've done a travel story, so I'll just do this one. It's a quick one about an interesting chap I met while I was traveling. I was actually probably in between traveling, I suppose you could say. I'd hired a Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes? Yeah, it was a Mercedes-Benz in 2015. And me and my mate Nicola, and we had a couple of ring-ins that would sort of stop in with us. We travelled all around, all around northern Serbia, across to Bosnia. I was doing a bit of writing at the time. That's right. I thought it would be an interesting story to take my Serbian friend to stay with my Bosnian friend in Sarajevo, and anyway, that story will be for another time. But we just come back to Belgrade. It was getting to the end of the trip, and I was hanging out at my mate's cousin's hostel, which is the Star Hostel. It's a now defunct hostel, which is it used to be just around the corner from the university in Belgrade, and if you've ever been in that sort of area, you've never seen so many beautiful women in all your life. So I spent day after day. I think the trip I took was about 5 weeks, so I probably spent a good week and a half, 2 weeks of that just sitting in the courtyard of the Star Hostel, watching beautiful women walk past us, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, and just being a general pervert nuisance, trying to make the hostel comers and goers laugh. I fancy myself a bit of a funny man at times. You may notice sometimes I err into a dry sort of humour. Anyway, I was sitting in the courtyard this day, and this guy comes in and he's got a Eastern United States accent, and he's asked to speak to the manager, so I put him in contact with Nicola, and basically he's just barged in and just walked himself around this hostel, and he's opening doors and he's looking around, and that looks alright, fucking check the kettle, seeing if they had a microwave or whatever the fuck he was looking for. And I thought, who is this fucking rude prick, At the time, I don't have a problem with Yanks, Americans, but at that time it was, right into the Iraq War, probably would be just at the start of all the shit going on in Syria, so travelling was a pain in the ass, and I'm pretty sure I would have put a lot of that blame on America. And I'm like, who is this cockhead walking in, making himself at home? Anyway, he's like, after he's given himself the tour, he's like, yeah, this will suffice, And you see, Nicola was like, I'm questioning whether I want to let you stay here. But anyway, we checked him in, showed him to his bed, and bloody, we got talking, and, after a while, the ice that had formed between us all had sort of, thawed a little. We still thought, well, there's something strange about this cat. And we just said, well, let's go and have a bit of dinner, So we went out to a restaurant and, had a few refreshments, and after a while we started to think, this guy is actually, he's got some stories, he's an interesting sort of character, and turns out he was a waiter or some sort of service staff in a restaurant over in, I'd be guessing at what state it was. I'm thinking it was like something like New Jersey. I'm pretty sure it wasn't New York, but it was one of those eastern states, and he was he wasn't a rich guy. He was, earned he worked hard for his money. So the reason why he was so insistent on, like making sure everything was spot on before he checked in was he'd been ripped off in just about every city he'd been to, he'd book online and then he'd get there and the Wi-Fi wasn't working, the kitchen wasn't satisfactory, whatever. And I was coming from a vantage point of a bloke that was probably overpaid, even though I'd never admit that too loudly. I was on a pretty good wicket back then, and so I was just thinking, fucking, it's $10 a night. What are you fucking whinging about? But when you're working hard for your cash, like that bloke obviously did, you don't like giving it away for, frivolities. And anyway, it was just I wouldn't even call him a tight ass. He just didn't have a lot of money to be throwing around, and but here I was. I'd wiped him off as a bit of a know-it-all, arrogant yank who, basically, fuck off, mate. We don't need you here. We don't need your money. But then, once we sort of got talking, it's so interesting that he had so many great stories. He'd travelled the world, and he'd done it on a shoestring budget, and he was the sort of bloke that you could really take some lessons from, and you could really, I love a good story, that was part of the reason why I started travelling in the first place. I realised, in my mid to late 20s, it's like, I don't have any stories, I pretty much transformed my life through travel and stuff just by, if it's going to make a good story, I'm going to do it, and that sort of leads me to where my next story will be, which I'm not going to tell you tonight, but it's I'm thinking I might tell you about some of the mishaps I've had travelling and how they create the best stories. Like everyone hopes that everything, they pray that everything goes well on their Kentucky or their European summer, but I quietly pray that not everything goes to plan, because the best stories, the best times quite often come when, righto, we've been hit with fucking lemons and so let's make lemonade, Anyway, so that's where tomorrow's story is gonna hit. So today's a beautiful day to be alive. It's Tuesday the 18th of November 2025. Tune in tomorrow.